and it either has one good turn of really healing out of range and just like removing the use of the cards from the mage, or they die, right? So, we'll have to see how it pans out as we dive straight into our game number 1. RDU versus Swidz. They, of course, playing their primary decks first. Is only in games 2 and potentially 3 that they are allowed to swap. So these are just going to be the decks they start every single match with in game number 1.
Yeah, and just like to clarify the position, I guess, this is the game where RDU might just live or die by Incanter's Flow in the opening hand, right? Because primary versus primary, if you don't hit early Incanter's Flow, sure, I think Priest has game with, right? They can actually tempo quite effectively, especially as Swidz is playing the Mankrik list. They can put on a bit of pressure. The mage is a bit slow because none of their stuff is discounted, and you can actually get there, right? After that, I think just the additional text that RDU has in his deck almost makes it irrelevant, because with the addition of Rigged Fair Game alongside Cram Session, alongside Spring Water, alongside Arcane Intellect, you're going to hit Incanter's Flow by like turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 anyway, because if you don't hit it in your opening hand, you're hitting card draw in your opening hand. That's just how the deck's built at that point. So I think that removes a lot of the redundancy. But yeah, that top deck from RDU, picking up the Incanter's Flow and the smirk that came with it, I think tells you everything you need to know. I think this is absolutely the right response from Swidz, just to understand, okay, I can't heal out of range. It's not possible. They play like 70 damage in their deck. I'm not going to be able to get it done. Let's just play for tempo instead.
Yeah, and speaking of approaches to the matchup, on RDU's side here is the mage. How do you approach Priest? Like, is it heavily based on how you're drawing, or... I'll change my question, actually. So, will RDU just throw burn as and when is available to him, or do you think he needs to save like a big one turn of burst, or is it somewhere in between?
It's somewhere in between. There's a balance, particularly with a no Cthulhu version of the deck, where you don't just want to, throw half burn at your opponent's face and put them to 15, because then Blade Master Apotheosis and that kind of stuff comes into play. But at the same time, you don't want to sit with 2 mana Fireballs and 3 mana Apexis Blast in your hand, because then the Priest opponent can actually Elutia and kill you at that point, right? Like, that's actually something very possible for them to do. So you've kind of got to establish the dynamic, right? Like, if you've got no minions in play, for example, and you're not casting Apexis Blast, sure, go ahead and burn face, right? Because then they can't Blade Master Apo you, because you've got nothing on board for them to rush into. If there's an empty board, go ahead and cast Mask, because you're going to need to get that done at some point anyway. But there is an interesting middle ground. When we move forward more into the secondary decks, I think you can be very, very greedy when you play the Cthulhu pieces, because it's very rare that your opponent can Elucia you and throw away all the Fireballs in your hand and all the Cthulhu pieces.
Right, that's a lot of mana normally, isn't it?
They have to pick one or the other win condition to deny, and then either way you've still got the other one available to you. So I think you can afford to be a lot more greedy when you have that redundancy. But yeah, there is definitely a balance still to be struck. Like, the game's not just over for RDU because he hit Incanter's Flow, but I think he is quite heavily favoured.
Well, he is starting to piece together a lot of this damage here. 2 3-mana Fireballs in hand, a sprinkling of card draw, arguably as well with that corrupted Ring Toss. And also, he got a decent minion, I would say, from the Apexis Blast. Like a 5/5 is probably just what you're okay accepting at this point. He obviously doesn't kill the 4/6 in one go, but he's got a multitude of ways to deal with this board, or at least the taunt side of it.
Indeed. Yeah, I think the one thing that RDU is missing right now to give him outright security is, of course, after Mindrender Elucia, the best card in Hearthstone, Devolving Missiles. You still have both of those remaining in his deck, which would effectively help him clear up basically any board state that Priest can present, right? Like, this is what Priest tries to do when they're behind because of Incanter's Flow being cast, is just make annoying board states, try and bait RDU into pointing damage spells at minions.
Right.
That's what you saw there with Skystalker, right? Annoying Death Rattle minion that RDU had to deal with. But of course, if you have access to Devolving Missiles, that's all irrelevant. But since RDU hasn't hit those yet, he is having to fight just a little bit more honestly.
I will say the Firebrand, definitely one of the better minions you can get from Font, right? It's just a good minion in itself. Helped him clean up that board with that combustion as well. And although, he will almost certainly lose this 5-1 this turn, he's not falling behind on board, and he did only use up an Apexis Blast previously. Key Warden's not too bad here for RDU as well, just looking at what other minions he has. Just because any extra burn you can potentially discover here is actually huge, because he's already used Apex Blast on a minion. So not too bad at all, if he gets the time to play it though, or at least the wiggle.
Yeah, not to mention, it can also just give you Devolving Missiles. That is a card that it can hand to you. But yeah, you can get Devolving Missiles, Shield of Honor, you can get all kinds of things that can help you out with either dealing with boards or pushing a little bit of damage. Useful enough card that we're actually seeing it in some people's side decks coming into this week of Specialist.
Another kind of tricky board here. These 4/6s are very annoying for RDU to deal with, and there you go. That's a small win in Swidz's book, I
look
think,
at the
just
nod.
getting that fireball.
Yeah, the nod coming out from Swidz. Like, these are the small victories you have to take, right, when you're against the flow start from the mage. He just gives himself the nod. It's like, all right, I worked really hard for it, but I got one fireball to hit a minion, and I have to take that as a win. Oh, RDU whiffing on the rigged fair game there, though. Bit of an issue.
Swidz is running just a little bit dry on stuff to do. The Draconic can obviously help that massively, but outside of that, I mean, I can't even look at that Ysera in hand, Sol, honestly.
Oh,
it already
went
pains.
green. The death went green. Yep, it's a 5-4 off the Netherwind portal. That's so clutch in the end for Swidz to be able to keep cycling off the Sethic. That's insane.
Oh wow, Onyx Mage Scribe and Thrive in the Shadows now? Like, well, that's value. Swidz has done a good job so far, but he needs to continue. Like, soaking up a Fireball and a Pexis Blast is not really enough to just be comfortable, so I do like this pick from him here.
Right. Get the Luminary down, start discounting some of these cards, get the Blood Mage cheap, get the Key Warden cheap, start cycling the Crown Session. You know everything else in the deck is down cheap. Finds the Brain Freeze as well to come down on top of that. Very nice. "12 health activate." Looks like that's what Swidz is leaning towards. Leaving up spell damage is a little bit spooky though, but currently there's not anything to actually do about that.
I have been conditioned already in one mirror match of Hearthstone to just hate Ysera. Yeah, I'm just looking at these, I was like, oh, Dream, go away.
That Brain Freeze has got to be clutch, right? You would imagine. Just to deny the threat of Ysera. Obviously, he still has cards to draw this turn, so he doesn't know what he's going to hit, but Brain Freeze at least locks out the ability for Apotheosis, Nightmare, all that kind of stuff actually being relevant and impactful on the game.
Oh, we already had one. But yeah, Brain Freeze is just a good enough card to take almost anyway, and that was pretty clutch. Nice 6-drop. Oh. Well, that's a problem.
You know how everyone was like, Pexis Blast got buffed because you can't get Jandis anymore. Yeah, well, Ysera got nerfed because now it gets devolved into Jandis. Idiots.
I don't think they were saying only one of those is true and the other one wasn't, though, to be fair, Soto. I'm not sure if calling them idiots is strong enough.
Oh my goodness, this Luminary still being alive is so insane right now for like the state of the hand. I'm pretty sure it'll go down to the Awakens here, of course, but still, looking at a Fireball get generated and then get shot down straight to 2 mana is pretty ridiculous.
Is there any reason for Blade Master instead this turn? He's just seen a devolve in, he can Apotheosis it, and my only worry from Swidz's side is how many more minions are you expecting to see from RDU this game? Like, is this the better heal he's just going to get? And he sticks the Blade Master, right? He can even put his hero... oh no, he can't now. But he could have even hero powered the Blade Master as well, so we'll see how it pays off.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, I think.
Right now, 23 does not feel safe.
Orb picked up for RDU. We can take a look at the 7 cards remaining. Can see still 2 refreshing spring water left in there, which means there will be calls of lethal coming very, very soon. Best believe.
It's just hilarious. I was like, why is Sol showing remaining cards already? And I was like, oh, RDU's only got 7 left, and Swidz has 17.
Yep.
Well, sometimes I still forget the card draw level of bot potential, should I say, of Mage, with Incanters, of course.
And that's specifically why I wanted to highlight it, right, is that RDU has done this without hitting a Refreshing Springwater. They're both still in the deck, and they're still down to the last 7 cards remaining.
What's really nice here for RDU, these 2 Brain Freeze can actually just be used. Who cares about them killing minions? He can just stop Apotheosis being a threat for 2 turns straight now.
Mm-hmm. The issue he's going to have, though, is that he still has both masks that he needs to connect, which is going to be a problem with the large health minions still remaining. Only 1 Devolving Missiles left to go as well. Might need some help for the Rune Door, but I think he has to go. He just has to go. Okay, Gurabashi Berserker. There's the Devolving, so he can go Brain Freeze the 1-3, Devolving the 4-9, try and get the board clear, use the Refreshing Springwater mana to try and drop a mask here. 3 health is huge. Brain Freeze mask is now available. I would highly advise not playing any more minions at this point in the game, just to play around that Blade Master Apotheosis healing on the other side.
If anything, it's like, I guess it's fine that the minions on there. I was just thinking, like, if anything, we would have loved to just not played anything, but of course that would have severely, like, stunted his turn, right?
I don't think it would. I totally agree with you, and I was going to call that out myself.
Oh, okay.
I generally think that, like, when I play this matchup, I try and kill my opponent with a Pexis Blast, just so I don't have a minion on the board at any point, right? RDU could have just as easily played Fireball there instead of an Apexis Blast.
How much mana was Apexis? Was it 3?
Achieved the same thing. I think it was 3. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
It would have either been 3 or 4, I think, right?
Going to be able to reduce all this down with palm reading. Imagine Swidz is just going to look for literally anything that's heal. Whoa! Oh! Okay. I mean, that's technically heal.
It is very technically heal, yeah.
My blade
now I think RDU has a problem.
not too quickly.
No Devolving in hand either.
Nope.
Oh, the minion's such a big deal, isn't it?
It is. It's huge.
Oh. Guess he needs Devolving off this Rune Orb, realistic. Oh, I guess he has Firework Elemental, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually reasonable. Wildfire time. Get those pings in.
Can fit in the Luminary now, yeah. Seems fine. 12 damage. Kablamo.
What, Book and Potion?
Don't see why not. Oh! Okay. It's tempting, right, to greed the potion at this point. You might get something much juicier out of the Font of Power, but I think it is a pretty attractive option to go for here with the potion.
Especially because it guarantees the 4-3, right?
Yes.
Because that's going to be a huge deal with Font.
True. Very true.
He's just
Now you
got
can
1
see
mana
that.
deal 12 Battle Crack.
Yeah, if only it went face, right? But they're looking at the remaining cards again. We can see RDU just in a spot of bother now because the burn damage is run out. There is nothing in there really that he's too interested in. He just has those 2 fireballs and the mask in hand for 22 damage. So rightfully, I think, going with the minion option with the Potion of Illusion there from the Babbling Book. Just trying to get some board presence, trying to get some minions to connect.
He could have gone Wildfire and started stacking up those Hero Power Soul.
True.
Again, Swidz going for a rally. Interestingly enough, does have a reasonable rally pool, I think. I think it's just, I was just looking at Desperate Prayer and just saying just pick every healing option and literally out-heal RDU and end the game that way.
Yeah, that's fair. I think minions are generally a better idea, though, because you know there's a mask left, right? So minions in play can function as healing in a weird way, but then because you know your opponent went like Potion of Illusion, you know that your minions in play can also fight their minions in play, so that not only do they heal you from mask, they can also heal you from the minions that you have to deal with on the other side. So I think I like going minions personally.
You want to cast a spell? I want to cast a spell.
Needs help. He needs help from Paveling Book, and why would you ever doubt it? Just knows. One mana Zephyrus.
Yeah, the original Zephyrus, Babbling Book.
Huh?
What just has to fight through here? I imagine this has to be a mask turn, right?
I would expect so, yeah. You can convert your combustion into 2 face damage if you really want to. Seems fine to me.
Yeah, I think RDU needs every point of damage he can possibly get to face.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we can see that is insane.
Arcanologist does draw a card here. By the way, one of the remaining cards is Netherwind Portal.
Baby, I'm a firework.
Incredible discovery! I'm almost out of cards.
Boom.
It's a weird noise that card makes. Oh, nothing looking too great. It does have Auspicious, of course. It is corrupted. That's only the starting point.
Yeah, just running out of removal options. He does have the ability to thrive in the shadows. Go digging for something he has remaining.
Wants a quick look at the minion first because he is running Psychic Split in his hand as well, so he might want to duplicate. Oh, okay.
Oh! Hitting the taunt is filthy there.
It scares me a tiny bit that he's played Apotheosis preemptively. I wonder how often RDU has to buy a new desk.
Okay, Luminary,
Like lethal or something.
Mazaki, Refreshing Spring Water. The fatigue cards count as spells, so you get all your mana back. No, they don't. I'm trolling.
I was going to say, wow, if that's an interaction, I really should know this, and I don't. This is something I've literally never seen.
You would have believed me, though, wouldn't you, if I'd have just kept going?
Yeah? Well, I would have asked you. I'd been like,
yeah.
oh, that does that subtle?
Yeah. There's no way you can get enough combustion juice here, right?
I'm just looking at, like, close your eyes, triple fireball, and just hope Mazaki gives you even more spell damage.
Runs out of what to do.
No,
Yeah.
no way to generate another card either, so not even a chance at devolving, which would have been the biggest impact here.
7. This
Just gotta try and stick a board.
1 and 5. He still just can't. He just can't clear the other one, right?
Yeah.
It's just dead. Just dead. Simply dead.
It's the weird kind of lethal.
Yeah. Probably just nightmare your thing to. Okay.
Oh, that's hysteria. Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah.
I was
So
just
even if
going
you
to ask.
didn't go fishing for anything, like you could just nightmare your guy into the Mazaki and then like devouring plague and stuff to clean up the rest, and like that's. I think that's still 100% guaranteed victory at that point.
I was even looking at, do you ever just start with devouring and see if 1 point hits the Mazaki, and if
One
it
hits
does, great. Like, you know, your turn's way simpler. Really weird hysteria. When hysteria does turns like that, I always feel like I don't know the card text. Because it's like, wait, attacks enemy minions until he dies? Like, what?
Yeah. But
It's
even
gonna
then,
be
just going back,
gameable,
like,
though.
the thing with the nightmare is that it would still live through RDU's turn, right? So
Right,
even if you had
right.
to nightmare your own minion, you still get that massive apotheosis heal, and it's still there to soak up mask damage on the following turn, which if you can do that for one more turn, I think the game's probably pretty much...
Yeah,
So The Hysteria looked clutch, but I think Swidz had more than enough
Yeah.
going on in his hand to be able to close out that game.
Yeah, I was even looking at, check the Devouring Plague. If it hits once, then you can actually just play Onyx Mage Scribe, which kind of does the same plan versus Mask, right? So there were a lot of good outcomes there, honestly, for Swidz, regardless of what happened. But that does mean game one is going to go to him, and I think it comes back to this turn. This was the big reset that Swidz needed, and it was done because RDU chose to develop a minion on the board. So that was something definitely to consider. I'm sure people will discuss whether that is correct or incorrect, but for me, it's the one combo you're terrified of, right? The board is kept clear for so long, and then you leave one minion and you haven't seen Samuro be played. So that is something I would be afraid of, and maybe too afraid of in my defense, I guess.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that you're right to raise it. It's definitely an issue, but sometimes, right, sometimes you just have all the burn in the world, right? Like, RDU did throw a fireball at a minion that game, which meant it's not the freest game in the world, but sometimes you just have all the burn in the world. You still have both masks, both fireballs, both Rune Orbs, both Apexis Blast, right? At that point, you can play around everything because you're just so far ahead. Sometimes when that's not the case, you're like, well, I'm going to use the Apexis Blast because having a minion in play is a good thing. My priest opponent is only halfway through their deck, so if they have Apotheosis Blade Master combo already, congratulations to them. I'm just going to do the generically good thing of putting the minion in play. Personally, it's something that I do think about a lot, though. As I said at the time, I generally do try and plan out my 2 to 3 turn burn you over the top to end with a Apexis Blast wherever possible, just to deny that ability to rush lifesteal back into it. But that's not to mention sometimes you do it the other way around because Mizaki, because Raz, because actual sources of extra damage that can come out from doing it the Apexis Blast way first as well. So it's a very tricky deck to optimize because of all the different branching paths of random effects and so on that you can get.
Yeah, it does mean these players are now going to have to choose whether they want to switch into their secondary, tertiary, or stick with their primary. And it looks like RDU is going to go over to secondary, and Swidz is going over to his tertiary list as well. So for just a reminder of the Swidz tertiary, he's removing Ysera, seems good right now, and removing Shadow Word Death, and he's going to play in replacement of just those 2 cards. There is double Ogre Mancer, which again, kind of self-explanatory. Ogre Mancer, a card built to take down spell-based decks, and guess what? Spell Mage, pretty heavily spell-based deck.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Swidz is one of the few people that really has anything stacked up for Mage this time around, but even then I wonder whether like Ogre Mancer is enough. I haven't seen anyone really with like double Ogre Mancer, double Cult Neophyte as a tech in their deck, and then maybe like 1 Desperate Prayer as well on top of that, just to round everything out. Although, whether the healing is more effective than the disruption, I'm not sure. But yeah, 100% of the time RDU is going over to his secondary deck because this is bespoke for this exact matchup with Priest. The Rigged Fair game, absolutely, in my opinion, the best card you can add to your deck to improve your win rate against Priest specifically. The Cthulhu, I think, a lot of people might make a big deal out of, and like, oh yeah, you just Cthulhu them, it's insane. But like, I think you will be amazed at the consistency with which you can just kill your Priest opponent without getting anywhere near the Cthulhu when you just have, draw 6 extra cards in your deck from extra Ring Toss and extra Rigged Fair game.
And we did see it on screen a little bit earlier on, but just to remind, if Swidz does win this match versus RDU, he gets his way out of the bottom 4 in European this week. So it's a big win. This will be a big win for Swidz because, again, although there is time to recover, you don't want to have to recover in the last few weeks of Grandmasters, right? You want to feel comfortable and set your sights on, finishing top 2, top 3.
Mm-hmm.
Job's done.
Not the best opening hand here for Swidz, although the Thrive will help him just dig a little bit deeper. RDU on the other hand as well, still just not looking too great. A Ring Toss that is quite far away from being corrupted right now, and just a lot of burn that he can't really play. So maybe just the fact that he's got that Arcane Intellect is just enough.
Yeah, slow-ish start from both players right here. I would like this to be a minion-based spell from Swidz. Yeah, okay, it takes the Draconic Studies. I think it's quite easy to get baited by the Renew in that position, right? Just thinking that, like, all healing, good healing, but I think Swidz recognizes that he needs to play a bit for tempo here. He needs to build up a little bit of pressure, and Draconic Studies and Raised Dead were certainly going to help him do that a little bit better than Renew was. Are you just coining draw 3? Seems good.
Seems like a good card to me.
Just wants flow, right? That's why he does it. He just wants flow as early as possible. Is not going to hit it, though.
Mini Mage. That's all I've learned, really, from all these Mage casts, is that Mini Mage is just the best card ever. And it's picked nearly every time.
Imagine that card, but poisonous, Raven. Whoa. You'd probably beat up some Rush Warriors with that, eh?
Imagine that card, but different in almost every aspect.
But it's mostly the same.
I feel like we've switched roles here, Sol.
Yeah.
I really like the Crimson Hothead, just based off what Swidz did last game. I think they did a great job of making RDU have to either hit through them with removal or throw the, if any minions he has at the point, into them.
Yeah, I like it as well. Take it, play it.
Press end turn and carry on.
Yep.
I think an Elixir is far too late in the game to be any real consideration, and similar enough to Proto Drake as well. I think by turn 7 you don't want to just play an 8/8 and pass. Like, I don't think that feels like a strong enough turn.
Wow. Swidz disagrees.
Yeah, and also using an Apotheosis on the Scorpid that has gained him 0 health.
Yeah, again, he did the same thing last game, right? Which I think is, you know, when if you think about it, you can kind of trace the decision tree through, right? I said it at the time, recognizing that what is most important is just putting pressure on RDU, which is what he did. That pressure that he put on RDU in the first game directly led to a minion getting fireballed, which healed Swidz for 6 because RDU did not have a fireball anymore. So, you know, it still does eventually cash out his healing. Boom, there you go. That Apotheosis, which created a 3-attack minion, has now healed Swidz for 6.
Yep. And now, wow, there's the tech coming into play. Ogre Mancer hits the board. And now RDU's going to have to work out what he wants to do. RDU's tech has also hit the game as well with that Mort of Cthulhu. Clean up the Ogre Mancer in close enough to the best way possible, right? If you can't kill it easily with minions, then one spell dead is really what you're after.
That's the biggest tilt. It's the biggest tilter in Hearthstone for me currently right now, Raven, is when people get value out of their Cthulhu spells. Because, like, the Cthulhu spells suck, right? They're objectively bad cards. That's not a hot take. But, like, I even think just, like, Cthulhu as a whole sucks. Like, I think the strategy is bad. So whenever it's just like, oh, Ogre Mancer, yes, game over, and it's just perfect top deck Maw of Cthulhu as the only out in their deck to deal with it, that tilts me off the face of the planet.
The big one for me, or the biggest one, is the 3 AoE. When that comes out and clears the board, and you're like, like, none of the other cards do this. Whereas you can kind of say that if that was Body of Cthulhu, then it challenges the Ogre Mancer next turn. You know, like, you can make, like, half arguments for the cards that do similar things, but nothing does a 3 damage AoE to the whole board, right? And that's the one that really pushes me over the edge. Speaking of more pieces of Cthulhu, Eye of Cthulhu's going to come down now. And no, not doing a bad job.
That is not bad, in fact.
And also, you
now,
like 2.5 cards in?
2.5 cards in? Wait, what?
Of Cthulhu, right? He has the body in his hand, I mean, is the half card, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was exactly what I was going to talk about, is at this point, I think RDU will be best served. As much as I am a Cthulhu down player, I think at this point in this state of the game, I think Cthulhu is probably his most reliable strategy from this point. Swidz has got a very, very good start with tempo into Ogre Mancer, and RDU is already down a fireball again. So I think at this point, going back to our discussion earlier of, like, if you're playing a Lucia, you can't always take away their burn and their Cthulhu pieces. I think at this point, RDU should prioritize protecting his Cthulhu pieces, right? Because that's what he needs. The problem is Psyche split on the other side from Swidz means that RDU really just has no game without devolving missiles.
And I know we talk a lot about Incanter's Flow, right? Because it is just, you could easily say the best card in the deck because of what it does to the rest of the deck, right? You know, it's not really a stretch.
It's not one click though, Raven.
Well, this is good synergy, Sol, because I was just going to say, even though Incanter's Flow is so powerful, no problem cannot be solved by devolving missiles, right? Like, you just deal with any problem you may have as mage with just devolving missiles, and you're quite right to highlight it, because that is what RDU's missing. So much so, he's just going to play Mask of Cthulhu to deal 11 and just start to try and chip away at this board.
RDU looks fundamentally fed up with this game of Hearthstone. And rightly so.
The tech coming into play well here for Swidz, though, because look at what it stopped, right? There's the ring toss that's been corrupted for a while and not been played. Spring Water's there. The Font of Power, which I don't think RDU can afford to just generate even more 2/2s and then play minions into those minions you've just created for your opponent. So that's definitely counterproductive. So they're definitely doing their job. I think this has to be the Proto Drake turn, right? You picked
the Proto Drake, yeah.
You picked it, you're winning board, spells are punishing for RDU.
He's specifically scared of Flame Strike, though, right? Is that if he leaves the board like this with the spell damage in play, even if there's a Flame Strike top deck, RDU doesn't even really need the ping to be able to clear up all of the Ogre Mancer business. So I think straight away, Swidz just deciding to add more health to the board is probably his way of saying, these Ogre Mancers are just winning me the game straight up. I don't need other minions in play. And I think that's a very reasonable way of looking at it.
I guess, yeah. For me, add more health to the board. Well, how about an 8/8 that death rattles into a relatively big minion most of the time as well? But yeah, you are right. Protecting these Ogre Mancers seem to be causing RDU the biggest problems here.
Yeah. Because I think, if he goes Flame Strike, both Ogre Mancers die, he can then trade the Mini Mage into the Proto Drake to finish off the first half of that body, and then it's a random 7-drop. And, I don't know how many times you've played Auspicious Spirits, Raven, but a random 7-drop isn't that huge on average.
It's very okay,
yes,
I think, is the correct response.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's it has to be Barrier, right? He's looking for. But it's weird because by playing it, he's created more minions to make Barrier worse.
I wonder how close we're getting here, because Swidz, if he's feeling the state of the game correctly, he will understand that any Cthulhu pieces in RDU's hand, he hasn't given RDU time to play them. Right? Not in the least that, they would be spawning more Ogre Mancer pieces at this point, but he's just been putting on so much pressure that RDU has had to do purely defensive things the whole time. So if he can get enough stuff out of his hand, I think a Lucia into steal a Cthulhu piece might just be the final nail in the coffin here that Swidz is aiming for.
Yeah, if he's not just dead already. I mean, look at the development on board. Yeah, so this what I was meaning was this covers all angles, right? RDU has to magically clear this board, and then Swidz has plan B.
Yes. It's Flame Strike off the Spring Water, and then he can clean up with the Brain Freezes, but he's just absolutely nowhere close. And after so long hyping up this deck as a free win against Priest, it looks absolutely unplayable in the face of Ogre Mancer, Raven, and that means Swidz is going to march on through as one of our 4 Priest players at the start of the week. He is now going to take his place in the top 4, being I believe, the first non-mage to eliminate a mage from this week of European Hearthstone Grandmasters.
That elusive title for a player, nice and short as well.
I take it back. Casey did it yesterday. I take it back.
But still, it's the control priest in there for Swidz, and you saw the tech come into play, right? And I know, especially the last couple of weeks, you've heard me harp on about Ogre Mancer, but to me, I'm surprised we've not even seen more Ogre Mancers in some lists. I guess it's because it's a mage-heavy region this week, right? But just generally, it's just such a good card, even if it doesn't do this level of work that's clearly done in this specific game. Creating just awkward situations for your opponent in a relatively spell-heavy deck is huge, and it's paid off for Swidz greatly. 2-0 versus RDU, and like I mentioned earlier, that means that Swidz, before he does anything else, so before he even plays in top 4 tomorrow, he is now out of the